How secure is your password right now? You chose it carefully, mixed in a number, maybe added a symbol, and told yourself it was strong enough. But what if the strength of your password is almost beside the point? What if the real question is not whether your password can be cracked, but what happens to it long before anyone tries? What if the very systems built to protect your password are generating value from it in ways you were never told about? There are industries operating right now that depend on password data, not just stolen data, not just leaked data, but the patterns, behaviors, and structures embedded in the passwords that people believe are completely secure. Here is the clue that should stop you cold. A password does not have to be stolen to be valuable. It simply has to exist. Who exactly profits from that existence? That answer is coming. But first, follow the trail.
Passwords are the locks on every door you have ever opened online. Your email, your bank account, your medical records, your streaming subscriptions, your work systems, your social media profiles. Everything that constitutes your digital identity sits behind a password that only you are supposed to know. This arrangement feels reassuring. You chose the word or phrase, you memorized it, and the assumption is that its secrecy guarantees your safety. But that assumption depends on something most users never examine. It depends on trusting every system that touches your password between the moment you create it and the moment it is stored on a server you will never see. When you create a password and submit it to a website or application, it travels across networks, through layers of software, and into storage systems managed by people and companies you have never interacted with and never consented to trust explicitly. Most reputable services encrypt passwords using a process called hashing, which transforms your password into a fixed string of characters that theoretically cannot be reversed. But the operative word is theoretically, and the journey your password takes before it reaches that hashed state, the moment of transmission, the handling by third-party authentication providers, the logging systems that record access events, is far less visible and far less uniformly protected than the public is generally led to believe. And here is where the clue from the beginning begins to cast a longer shadow. A password does not have to be stolen to be valuable. Think about what a password actually is beyond its security function. It is a human choice. It is a reflection of how a person thinks, what they value, what they remember easily, and how they respond to prompts. Those patterns are deeply consistent across individuals and across populations. And patterns, in the language of the data economy, are assets. Consider what is already known about password behavior at a population level. The most common passwords in the world have been documented extensively from data breaches, and they reveal something profound about human psychology. People choose names of loved ones, birth years, favorite sports teams, song lyrics, and simple keyboard sequences. They reuse passwords across multiple platforms. They make predictable substitutions, replacing the letter A with the number 4, replacing the letter E with the number 3. These are not random choices. They are deeply human choices, and they follow patterns that can be modeled, predicted, and profited from in ways that have nothing to do with breaking into any individual account. Data breaches are not rare events. They are constant. According to security research organizations, billions of username and password combinations have been exposed in publicly documented breaches over the past decade. Major incidents involving household names, retailers, healthcare providers, financial institutions, and social platforms have collectively placed the login credentials of a significant proportion of the world's online population into circulation in one form or another. But here is the question that most coverage of these events never asks. After the breach is reported and the headlines fade, where does that data go? And who is actually using it, and for what? The dark web marketplaces where stolen credentials are sold represent the most visible and most discussed layer of this economy. Packages of email and password combinations, sorted by industry, by country, by account type, are traded among criminal actors for prices ranging from a few dollars to thousands, depending on the freshness and specificity of the data. Fresh credentials from a banking platform are worth significantly more than an old list from a defunct retail site. But the criminal marketplace is only one corner of a much larger structure, and focusing on it exclusively misses the majority of the economic activity generated by password data. Cybersecurity companies represent the legitimate and enormously profitable side of this system. These are businesses built entirely on the existence of the password problem. They sell monitoring services, breach detection tools, identity protection subscriptions, and enterprise security platforms to individuals and corporations who are willing to pay substantial sums to know when their data has been exposed. Services that monitor the dark web for your credentials, alert you when your email appears in a new breach, or scan for password reuse vulnerabilities across your accounts generate recurring subscription revenue from fear of the exact problem their industry has not yet solved. The problem is the product. Or more precisely, the problem is what makes the product necessary. Password managers represent another layer of the industry. These services, which generate hundreds of millions in annual revenue, store and generate secure passwords on behalf of users who have accepted that they cannot manage their own credentials safely. The business model is straightforward. You pay a monthly or annual fee, and the service manages your passwords in an encrypted vault. But the aggregation of password metadata, the sites you use, the frequency of your logins, the services you subscribe to, the security habits you exhibit, represents a dataset of significant analytical value, even when individual passwords remain encrypted and protected. Authentication as a service is a further growth sector. Companies that provide login infrastructure for third-party applications, the systems behind every sign-in with Google or continue with Apple Prompt, are handling credential flows for billions of transactions daily. The business model is not based on selling your password. It is based on the data generated by your authentication behavior across platforms, which builds a picture of your digital life that is, in aggregate, commercially useful in ways that extend well beyond security. Now examine the scale of the industry that has grown around all of this. The global cybersecurity market is currently valued at over $200 billion annually, and is projected to approach $500 billion within the next several years. This is one of the fastest growing sectors in the entire global economy, expanding at a compound annual growth rate that exceeds most traditional industries, and passwords are the foundation of nearly all of it. Every security product, every identity protection service, every compliance requirement driving enterprise spending exists because the password system is both universal and fundamentally flawed. The cost of cybercrime globally, of which credential theft is a central driver, exceeds $8 trillion annually according to recent industry estimates. That figure includes the direct losses from fraud and ransomware, the regulatory fines, the remediation costs, the reputational damage, and the security investments made in response. $8 trillion. That is larger than the GDP of every country on Earth except the United States and China. And it is sustained year after year by the gap between the security that passwords are supposed to provide and the security they actually deliver. Return now to the clue. A password does not have to be stolen to be valuable. It simply has to exist. Does that feel more meaningful now? Think about the authentication service handling your login to dozens of different platforms. Think about the cybersecurity vendor whose threat intelligence database is built from analyzing billions of exposed credentials to understand attack patterns. Think about the breach monitoring service that needs a comprehensive index of leaked passwords to tell you whether yours appears in one. All of these services require access to password data, not to exploit it in the criminal sense, but to process it, analyze it, and derive value from its existence. And here is what makes this detail genuinely unsettling. The same dataset that a criminal buys on a dark web marketplace to attempt account takeovers is, in a different form and through different channels, the same dataset that a security researcher analyzes to build better defenses. The same breach that harms millions of users simultaneously creates business for the companies selling identity protection services to those same users. The harm and the remedy are monetized by overlapping industries, both of which depend on the existence of a fundamentally insecure system to justify their existence and sustain their revenue. Here is the full picture. The password economy is not driven solely by criminals or solely by protectors. It is driven by the structural reality that passwords are both necessary and perpetually compromised, and that every point in the cycle between creation and compromise generates value for someone. The criminal who steals them, the broker who sells them, the security firm that monitors for them, the vendor who sells tools to manage them, the insurer who covers the losses they cause, and the regulator who mandates the compliance frameworks built around them are all participants in an economy that could not exist if passwords actually worked as well as users believe they do. The password was supposed to be a secret shared between you and one trusted system. What it became is a raw material flowing through a global industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars, generating profit at every stage of its life cycle, including the stage where it fails. The industry does not profit despite password insecurity. It profits because of it. And the more passwords there are, the more breaches occur, the more fear is generated, and the more products are sold to address that fear, the larger the industry grows. So the next time you create a password, remember that it is not just a key. It is a data point in an economy you never agreed to join. It will be stored, potentially exposed, almost certainly analyzed, and possibly sold in some form before you ever change it. The industry that profits from it is waiting patiently at every stage of that journey, which raises the question that should stay with you long after this ends. If the system built to protect your password is also the system that profits most when it fails, who exactly is it designed to protect?